So,
dude, that's sick.
Looks just like you, too.
Exactly like me.
Hey there.
How's it going? Welcome to Counterculture Conversations. It's Dave and Jacob. Hope you're having a great day. So, this week...
Oh. We should close that door.
We should definitely close the door.
Here, time out. So, this week, we will be talking about worship and ownership.
Yep. Worship and ownership. Two fun ones, I think, are fun practices to talk about.
Yes. And it's nice that... I'm sorry. It's nice that Andrew's going to be talking on it.
Yes, it is.
And he's our worship pastor.
And he is our worship pastor.
We got that firsthand worship experience.
What? Okay. So, what? I'll just ask you a question.
Okay.
What is worship to you?
Yeah. Worship is. Okay. It splits into two things, because if someone who had no idea what church was like, hey, what do we do for the first 10 minutes of church or 20 minutes of church? I would tell them we worship.
Yeah.
So in a very literal sense, there is an act of singing that is called worship.
Yeah.
If someone were to ask me about, about the spiritual practice of worship, it would be, like most of these, a heart posture and an intentional reverence towards God.
Yeah. That
everything you do can be worshiping God. And so for me, worship is just that. It is taking a moment to have reverence towards God. Reverence being like, I'm looking towards God, and I am either I am expressing my devotion to Him, or expressing my pain to Him, or expressing things that He has done in my life back to Him. It's like prayer in a sense that it's a very vulnerable, confession kind of, but it's also, I don't know, maybe it is a lot like prayer.
Yeah.
When I think about it, maybe it's one of those, if there were two circles, I think the overlap would be pretty big between the two. Because there's a lot that, there's a lot of times, even on Tuesday and Thursday mornings, where I get more out of the worship aspect than I do the prayer aspect. So that was just kind of a tangent, but
no, it's good. It's good. I like it. I think you're right. There's a lot of similarities between the two, and I know growing up in the church, worship was always when we stand and sing, and I didn't really have an appreciation for it until I really got into my faith with Jesus. And I remember just being like, oh, this is the first we stand and we sing these old songs that I don't care about. It's and all this other stuff. And then you're like, so it kind of put this weird, I don't know, flavor in my mouth, taste in my mouth about it.
I hated worship music growing up.
Oh yeah, I did.
Absolutely hated it.
Yeah. No, there was something that I was like, I don't want to be in here right now.
No, and I was definitely one of the kids that just stood and kind of stared blankly. It was meh.
Yeah.
I drew pictures and
it was just,
I didn't like singing. My mom was she was Pentecostal before I even knew what Pentecost
Yeah.
was. Like, she was like, yeah, like, worship, you know. Woo! And yeah, and it was throughout the day. It was on, you know, she would put the radio on, like everything. So that just fed into my dislike for worship music. I didn't like it at all. I remember, too, another side story. I remember not liking singing so much because I didn't think I was a good singer. And then I remember sitting next to, his name is Trevor. And Trevor, I'm just now remembering that this is going to be recorded in all of... Trevor wasn't a great singer. Trevor was he, at least at that moment in both of our lives,
was not good.
He was not good. Maybe he became really good. He was bad at singing. I'm just gonna say it. He wasn't a good singer. It was like tone deaf. Like it was bad. And I remember, it's something that I actually think about a lot because it's so out of character for me. But I remember looking at him and being like, "You're not good at singing." And he said something to me that I remember probably on like once a month. I think of this moment in time where I'm like, "Hey, you're not good at singing." And he said, "I would rather be bad at singing and have God hear me than be another just silent person in the choir." And this was like when we were 12.
Dang,
So I was like, whoa. Okay, like instant rebuke. And I was like, oh man, you're right. What am I doing? Like, I would rather be noticed by God for how bad I stand out in the crowd just yelling.
Oh.
Than just be somebody standing. And I'm like, man, how do I... That is something to take from the act of singing, but there's also a lesson in that in how I live my life. Like, how often would I rather be this silent person in the choir when I go to the grocery store?
Yeah.
Like, how I act and how I do my daily routines. Am I submitting it all to God, even if I'm, maybe I'm not doing it good?
Yeah.
But am I submitting it fully to God as an act of reverence and worship towards Him? Or am I just being like, no, I'd rather not.
Yeah. Sometimes I because it's hard. You want to explain what worship is to someone, and you go, well, it's when we sing and we get our heart posture right. But then there's that, let everything that you do be like an act of worship. Let it be like an act of worship to God. And sometimes I think about it, I'm like, everything that I do, and that means just a continual heart posture of what I do matters to God. What I do is a act of worship to Him, and it for me it's a reminder of being no, what I do matters, and what I do, God takes pleasure in doing it, in seeing that, and the things that I do for Him and in His name. So all things that I'm doing are in His name, and it's always helped remind me of, even in the simple things, the little things, what I'm doing is it matters. And so, I think back to college, and we would go and work out, and then we'd go and play basketball for an hour. Just the good old days of just having so much time and whatever you want to do.
That's all day.
It was all day. It was just literally that's all we would do at the end of the day. But we, I remember that we started this thing where we started this little ministry. Not really a ministry. It was just a group of guys that would go and play, and we intentionally played. Had the idea that what we were doing was we're hanging out, we're having a good time, but we're also there to be a witness in this idea of worship or whatever. And had a lot of people, had one guy who gave his life to Jesus because of it, and all these things. But just this idea of what everything that you do, let it be an act of worship to God. Just have that heart, have that posture that I want to glorify the Lord with what I do. And it can be the little mundane things. It could be the big things. I think another big one was like what my dad told me. He's like, hey, like when you do your job, do it well, because like it's like like you're in this position for a reason. It's an act of worship to God. Like when you do that type of stuff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that as like they're. I don't think they can hear that. That there's a very real part of knowing that everything you do, it's the same way that we've talked about discipleship. That it's like whether you are actively participating in being a disciple of Christ or not, you are a disciple of something.
Yeah.
And it's the same way if, let everything you do be an act of worship towards God. Everything you do there is an act of worship in just the way that humans do things. I think is that if it's not for God, it's for an idol.
Yeah.
If I'm working hard at my job or at a career or building a career, like, is it for God or is it for pride, money, whatever, name, fill in the blank idol. And I think when we start to view worship like that, it changes how I act on bad days.
Totally.
But I feel like, man, I don't even know what Andrew's gonna say.
Yeah.
And so a part of me doesn't want to get too far off of actually singing, because I do think that there's a part of singing towards it. Like, it is a tradition, is an ancient tradition of people like going to the temple and singing as they walk into their temple, like as they walk into the place of their God, like. And so I don't want to completely divorce.
No, totally.
The two.
I think from what I've conversations I've had with him, he's gonna do a little bit of both, talk about both, which I think that for the majority of us, we can, like, worship is one, like what we do on Sundays. We come, we sing, and it's that heart posture, and it's like glorifying God, and it's doing that. But then it's like taking that and doing that throughout your week. But you're not always going to be just standing and singing. Like, it's going to be what you do throughout the week. Like, gets to be, like you said, bringing reverence to God and using it that way. And I think though, we can even segue into ownership from sort of or that thought and idea that everything's an act of worship, but into ownership, which is a fun one.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that ownership wasn't the first week of this, because it is like the cornerstone of all of these. Like, if you don't have ownership, we might as well not talk about prayer and fasting. Like, if you're not owning it, then you're not gonna be praying daily if you haven't owned your relationship with Christ. And so I think ownership is simultaneously the funnest to talk about, but also the hardest to kind of really get someone to walk into.
Yeah.
Is like everybody, if I ask somebody to pray with me, most people who go in the church will be like, yeah, sure, I can give you 3 minutes of my life.
Yeah.
If I try and convince someone to own every action they take and really have an intentionality in what you're doing, how you're doing it, who you're talking to, your friends, stop being on autopilot all the time, what you're ingesting, what media, whoa.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was signing up for this. It's
Yeah.
That's what discipleship is. It's a life transformation. And ownership is that first step of being no, I'm not okay with how I'm living.
Totally.
In all these categories.
Yeah.
and then actually doing something about it.
Yeah. No, you're right. And actually doing something about it, that's like the big key phrase, you know? I mean, what is it? John Tyson calls it the crystallization of discontent.
Yes.
That that a lot of times in our life we come to this point where we're so just discontent with everything around us, and you gotta almost get to that point. I guess someone else, might call it like a rock bottom or whatever you want to call it. I like crystallization of discontent because it means that you don't always have to like hit the lowest point in your life, but you can like kind of get to a point where you're just like, I'm fed up with how it is.
I'm no longer okay with doing this.
Yeah. And I think in that though, like there's like this big that I think that we go through these, I don't know, I mean, I think that we go through these moments and like sometimes we find ourselves coming back to these like moments of that, and it's because we never really took like full ownership of our lives and our lives with Jesus. This can be, and one thing I think about ownership that is, regardless of whether you are practicing Christian yet or not, or you're still on the fence, like I think that ownership just applies in general to your life, regardless, that you get to own what you do, own the decisions you make, and like own where your life is going.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's like that again, like I don't know, I it's easy to explain, or it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
In that sort of thing where it's like, man, it's like, well, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
How do you want to be remembered when you die? When you become 80 years old and everybody stops listening to you?
Yeah.
Because our culture is terrible. Like, what do you want to be remembered as? And what are you actively doing to be that?
Yeah.
Again, like you said, like whether you want to be remembered as a loving, faithful Christian or a hateful like villain, like not saying that you have to choose it's one or the other, but it is like, hey, be what you like, lean into what you're trying to do with this whole life thing. Like you are foolish to think that like you just have all the time in the world to do whatever. Like so many other people in literally any other time in all of human history. Like, you just don't. Like, you were born and then died at like 15 from you stubbed your toe or something. Like, there's just like, the truth is that there's a lot more people that are a lot more unfortunate. And we, as like 21st century Americans, have the ability to like own it. Own what you're doing. It makes me think about when I first moved to Atlanta and like the thought process that I had of, this was really when I'd been going to the church for a while, and I liked it. I liked Christians because I went to a church filled with like old people. So there's a lot of old ladies that told me that I was handsome.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And they gave me free coffee. So I got to be called handsome and get free coffee as much as I wanted. And every once in a while, the pastor would say something that I'm like, oh no, that seems nice.
Yeah.
Oh, love people. Yeah. I can agree with that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a monster. But where I'm getting is like, there was a very real moment of my life of being like, okay, I'm no longer happy with doing things my way. There's this new thing called Christianity that so far is a bunch of old ladies and free coffee and nice words. I feel like kind of this tug of war.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, God, you know what I'm going to do? I will give you a year of my life.
Yeah.
And I'll just, if you show up in my life, then hey, I get to witness God move in my life. Like, Christian, secular, Buddhist, like whatever. That's a pretty cool win. And if you don't show up in my life, God, I get to go back to doing all this stuff, which was actually a lot of fun for me. But now it's not fun because there's this whole thing in the back of my head all the time.
Yeah.
And so it very much was that crystallization of discontent and being like, okay, God, I'm going to give you a year. I'm going to move to Atlanta and I will say yes to everything that you ask me. If you ask me it, I'll do it. If the church asks me to do something, like, I'm just sold. I will give you 12 months of my life. And so far, so good. Like, it's been, and so the very real aspect of like, I don't know what this is, but I'm going to own it enough to give God a chance to work through it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's right to make, wagers with God of being like, you have to do this or not.
Yeah.
I think he was really nice to me to show up how he did. And that's a talk for another time. But like, there is a real act in that of being like, okay, God, I'm yours and I'm 100% on this.
Yeah.
I think if you live a life where you're like 50% on everything you do, you don't really ever get to know anything about, like, you don't get to say you don't like something if you didn't put your 100% in on it. And be like, yes, I'm sold.
No, yeah.
So that was a lot.
That is a lot. That's crazy. I didn't know that. I don't know that I knew that's exactly why you moved down here. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, and now it's 3.5 years later.
Yeah.
And God just kept showing up, so I was like, okay.
All right, I get it.
I'm Christian now. I'm like fully in. Yeah. Yeah.
That's cool. This is crazy. We were just talking about, like, as we were talking about it, it reminded me, like, when was this, 2 or 3 weeks ago? For some reason, all of these Kobe Bryant videos kept popping back up onto my YouTube feed or whatever. I guess I'd like clicked on basketball, whatever. And at the beginning,
new Space Jam. No,
Kobe. That's LeBron.
I don't know basketball that much.
so
they both dunk.
They're
They're dunkers.
Yeah, they both shoot. But Kobe, rest in peace. He passed away at the beginning of the year last year, which should have been a just tell-all sign that 2020 was gonna was just gonna kick rocks. That's all it should have been. And so, no, but like, so I started watching like Kobe videos, and then I watched like all these memorial things. I got down on the YouTube rabbit trail and like watched like Shaq at Kobe's funeral speech, and then I watched like Michael Jordan at Kobe's funeral speech, and Michael Jordan, the way that he talks about him, because he's a little bit old, he was older than him, but said he was really like a younger brother, and like how Kobe would just call him in the middle of the night, like 2 in the morning, like, hey, what would you do for this post move? This idea that Kobe owned his life so much that, like, I mean, it's all he wanted to do, and he like lived it out and breathed it out, and it's like what people knew him for, that even off the court. It's like he like when he wanted to be the best, and that's what he did. He like put all like just this ownership into being the best basketball player that there ever was. Like, that's what he tried. That's what his goal was.
Yeah.
And like he, in regards to what it took, like it was a crazy little, like, listening to Michael Jordan talk about Kobe Bryant like that, and you're just like, that's a level of ownership over your life.
Yeah.
And not saying that this is what I'm not saying, that you want to be a professional basketball player and then like own it. You're just gonna own it already. You're gonna go and do it. Kobe Bryant was
Kobe Bryant was terrible at basketball at age 12. Look at him,
dude. He was
great.
He was a spectacularly gifted individual that was able to do that. But the level of ownership that he had over what he did. They talk about how much time he spent in the gym, how much time he did. That's where the ownership part of it comes in. And so I think, like, in our own lives, that there may be some things that we want to do. Even this is even going past your relationship with Jesus. One, I think that you need to have a you need to take ownership for your relationship with Jesus, because at the end of the day, it's you and him, and it's no one else. Like, your relationship, and a relationship takes two people to do, and there's got to be like this point where you come and you go, okay, God, like, I'm actually going to take ownership for my half of this relationship. Like, it just is what it is. But even in that, like, I think there's going to be places in our lives where you're going to have this crystallization of discontent, and this doesn't even have to do with Jesus. This is just life in general, where you're just going to have to, like, take ownership over what you want to do and do it. And, like, do it to the best of your ability. And, and do that. So,
I read a book that I don't remember what it was called, but I promise you I read it.
I swear.
No.
I promise I read it.
I
don't
definitely read it. I read this book that part of it was part of it of the book tasked you with writing your own eulogy,
bro.
Which, for those of you who don't know what a eulogy is, it is what the speech that someone gives about you when you've died at your funeral, and you have to write it from the perspective. You write like 5 eulogies from the perspective of your family, your close friends, people who like you work with, people who don't know you, but like all these different areas of relation. You write a eulogy. You write a eulogy for those people.
Jeez.
And the amount of insight it brings when you are like, again, yes, I want to be remembered as like a faithful follower of God that did not do anything unless he knew that it was aligned with God's will 100% all the time. But I also want to be remembered as somebody who like brought joy to people. I want to be remembered as someone who was wise with their words, not a genius, but like I want to be smart with the way that I say things to people and how I say things to people, and how much that influences the way that, like, if somebody comes up to me, well, no, I'm not going to go off the cuff and like, I'm probably not going to get in a lot of arguments if I keep it in the forefront of my head that it's like, hey, I want to be remembered as someone who's patient and gentle and kind with everybody I meet.
Yeah.
Because I see that in other people and I say that's a really cool quality.
Totally.
And so, I don't know. It's very morbid to ask a bunch of high schoolers to write their own eulogy. But it's, prepare your funeral.
Prepare it. Do it now. No, that's good. I mean, it's a perspective change for sure. And I mean, if there's a question that we get to ask people at home, it's this. It's like, I think it's a good question. What do you want to be known for?
And what are you doing to make that
happen?
Happen.
What is it? What does he want to be known for? And what are you doing to make it happen? I think those are good questions just to ask in general. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Sick. Thanks, brother.
All right, see ya.